walking through days that felt like ordinary time, but in the silence beneath routine, a sinister thread was being woven. A thread stitched by the hands of someone you once trusted with your whole heart. Your ex moved like smoke behind you, whispering lies in rooms you didn't know existed, planting seeds of destruction with the precision of someone who knew every part of you, every weakness, every secret hope. They didn't just leave, they lingered in shadowed corners, planning something that would cut far deeper than absence. There was a time when their eyes were full of promises, but even then, deception lurked like a serpent beneath the waters. As you loved them, they watched you with a different hunger, one that saw vulnerability not as something to protect, but as something to exploit. And while you moved through life unaware, they opened the gates behind your back to someone whose betrayal would feel even more impossible. This family member, cloaked in the illusion of kinship, stood at the crossroads of loyalty and greed, and chose the path that led away from you. You could feel their shift in energy before you saw it in their face. The cooling of the voice, the way their arms held back when once they would have embraced. They did not stab you with their own hand. No, they held the blade for another, and in doing so, stained their soul. The moon trembled behind torn clouds the night the betrayal took shape in full. Spirits recoiled as the unseen agreement was made. An alliance rooted in resentment, jealousy, and silent competition that grew like mold in the dark spaces of your family's love. God says there are betrayals so intimate they echo into spiritual realms, and this was one of them. Your ex whispered poisoned words to this family member, convincing them that your downfall was justified, that you were the villain in your own home. And perhaps they believed it. Or perhaps they simply wanted to believe it. Wanted a reason to justify stepping so far out of alignment with truth. In that moment, they agreed not just to a betrayal of you, but to a spiritual theft of legacy, of name, of covenant. There were signs, but they moved like shadows at the edge of your awareness. Small things, shrugged off too easily. The missed calls, the overlapping stories, the strange silences in rooms that used to hold laughter. The air began to thicken with unsaid things, with glances that held more than words, and still you gave them the benefit of the doubt, because love and family both demand so much trust. Archangel Michael says the blade hidden by love cuts the deepest, and no human armor can block it. You were not meant to see it coming, not because you are weak, but because your heart was open, and open hearts Do not look for war behind every smile. But the war had already begun. In the places you could not see, they used your memories like tools, weaponizing your kindness, your vulnerability, your history. They took the softest pieces of you and twisted them into lies, creating stories that suited their betrayal, and the world believed them for a time. Even heaven fell silent, waiting to see what you would choose when the truth finally surfaced. And then came the moment when the lies began to bleed through the veil. Something shifted. An overheard phrase, a forgotten message, a strange instinct that wouldn't let go. The betrayal was still hidden, but you began to feel the burn beneath your skin, as if your soul was trying to warn you through the static of confusion. God says your intuition is sacred, a language spoken between soul and eternity. And in that rising discomfort, He was already preparing you. The heartbreak had not yet come, but the ground beneath you was beginning to fracture. The divine realm was watching, trembling with the weight of what had been done in secret. They were not just breaking your trust. They were trying to break your spirit. The enemy always comes through the ones closest to your heart, because that's where the greatest damage can be done. And still, you resisted believing it, because to accept the truth would mean facing a pain so raw it might shatter your perception of everyone you loved. But heaven will not allow darkness to grow forever in hidden places. Truth burns through deceit like wildfire through dry brush, and already that fire was kindling in unseen ways. Dreams became strange. Conversations took on double meanings. The world began to reflect something out of sync. God says you were never abandoned. He allowed the betrayal to run its course, only so you would see it for what it was. So you would not build your future on a foundation cracked by lies. You are being brought into clarity, not to destroy you, but to free you from what has been poisoning your peace. The night before everything began to unravel, your spirit reached up without words, aching for something, anything, to anchor you. That ache was heard in realms you cannot see. Angels were gathering, preparing not just to reveal the truth, but to shield your heart when it came crashing in. This is not just a story of betrayal. It is a spiritual war for your destiny. And though the ones who conspired think they have won, they have only hastened the moment where divine justice begins its descent. You felt the veil begin to tear, not with sound, but with an ache so strange it made your chest feel hollow, as though something had been quietly removed from within you. There was a stillness in your family members' presence, like a mask too smooth to be human. And behind their eyes, a coldness had begun to glimmer, subtle but unmistakable. You told yourself it was stress, miscommunication, coincidence. But your spirit, sharpened by suffering, no longer accepted comfort from illusions. Then came the unraveling, one thread at a time. A strange financial detail you never noticed before. A shared contact that never should have existed. A moment when you realized their stories aligned too perfectly, too rehearsed. Like they'd practiced them in rooms you were never allowed to enter. Their betrayal wasn't a heat of the moment thing. It was a choreography, a slow, calculated symphony of silence, lies, and perfectly timed omissions. God says, when the veil is torn, truth will pour through like floodwater, messy, merciless, and divine. And it did. You began to see how this family member, the one who had once held your hand at funerals and laughed beside you at birthdays, had become a silent disciple of your ex's poison. Envy had been the silent currency between them. Jealousy had found common ground. And in their shared disdain, they built an altar to your undoing. This was not just betrayal. This was blood turned cold. A sacred bond of family, desecrated by selfish ambition and the thirst to be seen as more important, more righteous, more loved than you. And once you saw it, you could not unsee it, could not deny the weight of their involvement, the bitter fingerprints they left on your back. The worst moment came not in their confession. There never was one, but in the quiet realization that they had never truly rooted for you. Even in your victories, they watched with narrowed eyes. Even in your grief, they measured your sorrow against their own ego. They let the enemy whisper into their ears that your light diminished theirs. And rather than confront their own shadows, they chose to dim yours. Archangel Michael says the betrayal of blood is an ancient weapon, and only heavenly fire can purge the damage it causes. You did not deserve their betrayal. You did not create their bitterness. You are not responsible for the shadows they refused to heal. But you have been chosen to stand in the ruins of what they've done and become something they cannot touch. A soul forged by divine fire, not defined by human sin. They worked in darkness because they feared your strength. They feared the way others loved you, the way you rose even after heartbreak, the way you held your dignity even in pain. Your resilience was a mirror they could not bear to look into, and so they shattered it with lies and whispered doubts behind closed doors. And as they tried to rewrite your story in your absence, heaven documented every word, every motive, every act of cowardice. God says there is no darkness deep enough to hide from divine justice. And soon, what was done in secrecy will be shouted into the light, not by your hand, but by the hand of the Most High, who defends those who cry out in silence. They underestimated you. They believed their proximity to your life gave them power over it. They thought their betrayal would break you, bury you, silence you. But betrayal has a strange way of calling forth the exact transformation the betrayers feared most. You began to see with spiritual eyes. The patterns emerged, clear and cold, like frost tracing across glass. Moments you thought were misunderstandings became coded messages. The family members' indifference, their lack of support, their sudden alignment with your ex's narrative. It was all part of the same plan. Not spontaneous, not accidental. Strategic. There were meetings you never knew about. Conversations where your name was spoken like a curse, dissected, reframed. Your pain was turned into performance, your vulnerability into leverage. They turned you into a story they could control until now. God says you were never alone in this uncovering. The Spirit hovered beside you, even in confusion, even in tears. The moment your heart broke was the moment heaven's sword was unsheathed. And from then on, your enemies were marked not by you, but by justice that cannot be bribed, bargained with, or delayed. There was a night when you cried so hard you couldn't breathe. The betrayal felt like drowning, slow, suffocating, surreal. You asked why. Not to anyone in particular, just out loud into the darkness. And though no answer came in that moment, heaven recorded your breathless ache and turned it into prophecy. Because what they thought would destroy, you will become the reason your name is lifted in the Spirit. The family tie they used against you will become the bond heaven severs to make room for new spiritual lineage. One built not on blood alone, but on truth, honor, and divine calling. Archangel Michael says your lineage is being recalibrated. Those who joined hands against you have forfeited their spiritual claim to your favor. The mantle on your life is being cleansed, reissued, and elevated beyond their reach. They will see your rise and weep, not because of vengeance, but because of the opportunity they squandered. And now, as the truth breathes into the open, you are standing on sacred ground. The pain is real. The betrayal cuts deep. But what is coming will be deeper still. Deeper healing, deeper power, deeper purpose. God says He has not just seen your pain, He has sanctified it. The veil has fallen. The family member's betrayal is no longer a secret. And with the revelation comes a choice. will you be hardened by the wound, or sanctified by the fire it ignites? You didn't crumble the way they expected. Yes, you broke. Your spirit fell to its knees. Your breath caught like thorns in your chest. And your soul screamed into the unseen. But beneath that breaking, something ancient stirred. Something forged beyond human betrayal, something divine. Fire from heaven, older than your pain, called forth not by rage, but by destiny. They thought the exposure would end you, that their alliance would silence your voice, leave you shamed, hollowed, forgotten. But betrayal has a way of peeling back the skin of illusion and awakening what they never saw coming, the warrior within you. And as the truth spread its wings like a storm above the ruins they created, the divine fire within you began to rise, not in anger, but in unshakable clarity. Archangel Michael says the fire of transformation is not gentle. It scorches away falsehood, burns through every lie you've been told, even the ones you told yourself. And now, that fire is alive in you. It trembles beneath your ribs, illuminating places you once thought too broken to carry light. Your hands may still tremble, but they no longer reach for what betrayed you. The betrayal unlocked something heaven had long kept sealed, divine acceleration. What they delayed, God is now hastening. What they tried to tear down, God is rebuilding with supernatural speed. Brick by holy brick, woven not with human approval, but divine assignment. You are being anointed in the very areas where they tried to curse you. There are moments now where you feel it without understanding it. Waves of clarity, sudden strength in your voice, dreams that feel like instructions from another world. God says these are not coincidences, they are blueprints, fragments of your future being downloaded into your spirit as your enemies watch, confused by your unexplainable peace. They hope to write the end of your story, but God has stepped in with divine ink, and He is not finished. In fact, He has only just begun. The betrayal was the trigger, the fall was the ignition, but the rise, this holy, impossible rise, is where justice begins to roar. You will no longer explain your worth to those who pretended not to see it. You will no longer bleed to prove your innocence to those who fed on your pain. This fire that has awakened in you is not for them. It is for your calling, for your voice, for the next chapter that cannot be touched by what tried to kill you. You are being reintroduced to yourself, not the broken self, not the betrayed self, but the self that was hidden under years of compromise, silence, and making others comfortable. And now that self is walking forward with feet kissed by fire and hands shaped by divine purpose. God says you are stepping into territory that requires the version of you that could only be born in betrayal. The meek version could not handle it. The forgiving to a fault version would have forfeited it, but the awakened version, the fireborn version, was made for it. You will start to see your enemies become unsettled, not because of vengeance, but because your peace will haunt them. Your light will confront their darkness. Your survival will remind them that God defends His own in ways they never expected. They were not counting on your transformation. They thought they were burying you, but heaven saw it as planting. And what grows from betrayal's soil carries a fragrance only angels understand, an aroma of sanctified suffering, of glory forged through pain. Archangel Michael says, even your tears have become weapons now, baptizing the ground you will soon inherit. You're being prepared for elevation, but this time, no counterfeit hands will be allowed to carry your crown. The ones who watched your fall with smirks and silence will not be invited into your next victory. Heaven is sealing the room. The guest list is sacred now. You are beginning to see signs, shifts in people, sudden departures, unexpected doors opening or closing. Don't resist. Don't cling. These are holy disruptions. God says everything not aligned with your elevation must fall away before the next release, or it will contaminate the blessing. You may feel lonely in this stretch of the journey. You may long for understanding, for human comfort, for someone to say, I see what they did. But God says, I saw, and that is enough. His justice does not operate on human timelines, but it is always precise. You are not forgotten. You are being refined. The divine fire within you is not a punishment. It's a promotion. You are being forged into someone who can no longer be manipulated, no longer controlled, no longer tethered to those who benefited from your silence. You are dangerous now, not to others, but to darkness. There will come a moment when you speak, and the atmosphere will shift. Not because your voice has changed, but because your authority has. Heaven has marked you. The betrayal was their doing, but the anointing is yours. You do not owe them an explanation. You owe God your obedience. Archangel Michael says the battlefield is clear now, and the enemy is trembling. Not because of who you were, but because of who you've become. The same angels that wept for you are now standing with swords drawn, because your restoration is not passive. It is a holy war. Let them whisper. Let them pretend. Let them rewrite history in their own minds. It will not change what God is about to do. This next chapter is written in fire, and your name is carved into it, not as a victim, but as a vessel of divine justice. God says this is your season of reversal. What they meant for evil, heaven is turning for your good. What they called the end, heaven has declared the beginning. Stand still and watch. The divine fire has been awakened, and it will not be extinguished.